The shift was gradual, like the way shadows stretch across the pavement at dusk. I didn't notice it at first. There weren't arguments or slammed doors, no dramatic declarations that begged for attention. Just a creeping quiet. Delilah and I used to fill silences with easy chatter, her words spilling out like songs, my responses steady and measured. But now, even the silence had weight, like something thick hanging between us that neither of us acknowledged. I remember coming home after a 12-hour day at the warehouse not too long ago. The operations had hit a snag, a delayed shipment that would have bottlenecked the entire chain if I hadn't gone in to personally oversee it. By the time I walked through the front door, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. Delilah was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine in one hand, her phone in the other. She barely looked up when I hung my jacket. Long day," I said, more out of habit than the need for a response. The words hung for a moment, unanswered. She offered absent-mindedly, scrolling through whatever was on her screen. Her nails clicked softly against the glass. It wasn't unusual by then, but it still stung in a way I wasn't sure how to explain. I didn't push. I toed off my boots, hungry and half hoping she'd be the one to ask how the day had gone. She used to. Instead, the sound of her glass against the table and the hum of her notifications filled the room as I disappeared into the kitchen. Dinner was leftover pasta, cold and stiff in its Tupperware housing. She said she had a late meeting earlier in the week, so I figured she didn't have time to cook. That had been happening more often, too. Late meetings, gatherings, networking events. I ate alone that night, spooning lukewarm bites into my mouth while her voice drifted faintly from the other room. She made a call at some point. Laughed. Not her usual polite kind, the one she used with colleagues or acquaintances. Real laughter, like something genuine had struck her funny. I caught myself gripping my fork tighter than I needed to. It passed quickly, but it left a sour taste I couldn't blame on the pasta. It felt like we shared the same space but existed on different planes. Parallel lives, intersecting only when absolutely unavoidable: bills, house repairs, groceries. But even those touched only the surface. There were no cracks to peer through, no way to see what lay beneath. The call from Carter came while I was in the middle of going over some quarterly reports. My pen paused mid-number, my eyes drifting to the stack of papers sprawled across my desk, though I wasn't really seeing them anymore. His voice had this weight to it, dragging on the line like an anchor. Carter wasn't someone who minced words or padded a blow. When he hesitated, it meant he was choosing them carefully, which only made the knot in my gut twist tighter as he spoke. Hearing Delilah's name hitched my breath a second. She wasn't alone, he said, then rattled off details with that uncomfortable precision he always leaned into when facts felt too heavy. A motel off the bypass, the kind of place people didn't usually go just to pass the time. Hand in hand with another man. Something primal clawed at my chest, but I forced it back. My hands gripped the edge of my desk, hard enough to make my knuckles ache as I tried to focus on what he was saying. I didn't interrupt, not even when he told me he'd taken photos. Carter's sense of loyalty was an unrelenting beast. He wouldn't have taken this step lightly, and knowing that made the images he described all the harder to ignore. When he offered to send them through, my throat dried up and I managed to agree. Barely. My voice sounded foreign, muffled even to my own ears, as though it came from somewhere far away. The seconds between the call ending and the chime of my phone felt like they stretched for hours, but not a single thought in my mind settled. They swirled, disjointed, chaotic. The pictures hit my inbox, and my finger hovered for a half-beat of hesitation before opening them. There they were. Delilah, unmistakable even from the angle that Carter had managed. That brightness to her posture I'd known for a lifetime now aimed at someone else, some stranger, mid-life, her hand clasped in his as if it belonged there. The pit in my stomach deepened. I leaned back, phone still in hand, staring but not really processing anymore. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. Delilah loved me. We loved each other, didn't we? 21 years of marriage couldn't just unravel on a Thursday afternoon, could it? The air in the room felt heavy, pressing down on everything. Still, I couldn't look away. Later that evening, I pushed the peas around my plate, the metallic scrape of fork against ceramic, echoing in the suffocating silence of our dining room. My appetite had vanished hours ago, replaced by a gnawing emptiness in my gut that had nothing to do with hunger. The evidence burned in my mind, the photos, the timestamps, the familiar red dress she'd worn to lunch. Not at a desk, but with him. Delilah stabbed at her chicken with more force than necessary, her knuckles white around the fork. 21 years of marriage had taught me her tells. The slight flush creeping up her neck, the way she avoided my gaze, the defensive set of her shoulders. All of it screamed guilt. I took a slow sip of water, buying time to steady my voice. The merger meeting went well today. A safe topic, business, neutral ground. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. That's good. The Thompson account? Yes. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I'd built our life on honesty, integrity. Every business deal, every promise, every commitment. My word had always been my bone. Now, here we sat, playing out this charade over cooling dinner. How's Sarah doing with the new software implementation? Delilah's voice was too bright, too casual. She was trying to steer the conversation, control the narrative, just like she did with her clients. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her sales expertise, that silver tongue that had helped build our life together, now deployed to maintain her lies. My stomach churned. Fine. I set my fork down. The clink seemed to echo. Actually, you might have seen her today. She mentioned having lunch at that new Italian place on 4th Street. A microsecond of panic flashed across Delilah's face before her sales mask slipped back into place. Oh, no. Like I said, I was stuck at my desk. End of quarter reports. You know how it is. The practiced ease of her lie made me wonder how many others there had been. How long had I been living in this carefully constructed fiction? Right. I pushed my plate away, my food barely touched. The reports. You'll go in for that and... yeah. Delilah's eyes narrowed at my tone. 2 decades together meant she could read me too. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. We were 2 chess players, each waiting for the other to make the next move. You know what? Her chair scraped back suddenly. I'm not very hungry. I think I'll go take a bath. I watched her gather her plates, her movements sharp and agitated. The diamond on her left hand caught the light as she picked up her glass. The same ring I'd saved for months to buy when we were just starting out, young and full of dreams about our future together. She paused at the kitchen doorway, her back to me. Is there something you want to ask me, Amos? It was a challenge, wrapped in a question. The ball was in my court. I could lay my cards on the table, force this festering wound into the open. Or I could swallow the bitter pill of her deception for another night. Pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked heavily in the silence between us. 1 second. 2. 3. No, I finally said. Nothing at all. Next week, I sat in the sleek downtown office, taken aback by its modern aesthetic. The glass walls and minimalist furniture were a far cry from the noir detective scenes I'd imagined. No cigarette butts, no half-empty whiskey bottles, just state-of-the-art computers and a wall of surveillance monitors. Rebecca, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 30s, pulled up digital blueprints on her tablet, while Marcus typed away at his workstation. Their PI's badges gleamed on their belts, next to what looked like military-grade communication devices. "We use AI-enhanced facial recognition," Rebecca explained, showing me their surveillance setup. "Combined with our network of high-resolution cameras, we can track movements across the city." The technology impressed me, but I needed certainty. "And this will hold up? The evidence you gather?" Maka swiveled in his chair, his fingers still dancing across the keyboard. "Everything's time-stamped, geotagged, and authenticated. Chain of custody is maintained through blockchain. Courts love our work." I nodded, my tension easing slightly. Their confidence and professionalism spoke volumes. This wasn't some back-alley operation, but a sophisticated intelligence-gathering firm. Rebecca laid out their plan, pointing to various locations on a digital map. "We'll have eyes on all entry points, movement patterns, electronic communications. Nothing will slip through." The monthly rate they quoted made me wince, but I'd spent more on less important things. I signed the contract, watching as my digital signature appeared on their secure system. "We'll have preliminary results within a month," Marcus assured me, handing me an encrypted phone. "All communications go through this. Completely secure. Completely private." Walking out of their office, I felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Not what I'd expected when I'd searched for private investigators, but perhaps that was for the best. Sometimes the most effective solutions come in unexpected packages. It didn't take them long to collect the evidence, just about a month. I sat in my car outside the private investigator's office for 20 minutes. Staring at the manila envelope on the passenger seat, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to throw it in the nearest dumpster without looking inside. Finally, I forced myself to pick it up and open it. Photos spilled onto my lap. There she was, my Delilah, wrapped in another man's arms outside a motel. More images followed. Stolen kisses in a parking garage with a different guy. Intimate dinners, holding hands across restaurant tables. The investigator had organized everything meticulously. Dan Latham's section came first, the sales director at her company. Expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, sneaking into each other's cars during lunch breaks. Then Henry Shaw, a younger guy who worked at the auto shop. More casual meetings, but just as intimate. Coffee shops, park benches, his apartment. My stomach churned reading through their text messages. The way she flirted, made plans, covered her tracks. The same playful tone she used with me, copied and pasted for other men. In one exchange, she joked with Dan about how predictable I was, how easy it was to maintain her boring home life, while having fun with them. The surveillance logs painted a picture of careful scheduling, meeting Dan on business trips, seeing Henry when she claimed to be shopping or at the gym. She'd built an entire parallel life around me, like I was just furniture in the background of her real adventures. 21 years of marriage reduced to a stack of damning papers. I remembered our anniversary dinner last month. How she'd seemed distracted, checking her phone. Now I knew why. While I'd been planning a surprise weekend away, she'd been coordinating time with her lovers. The hardest part wasn't the physical betrayal. It was seeing how easily she compartmentalized it all, keeping me around for stability while seeking excitement elsewhere. Like our life together was just a convenient backdrop for her real desires. The lawyer's office smelled like pine cleaner and fading ambition. Stacks of legal documents lined the walls, each one a grim reminder of someone's life reduced to numbers and clauses. After 45 minutes of cold reality checks, I stepped back into the blinding sun, jaw clenched tight enough to make my head throb. My footsteps echoed heavier than usual on the pavement. like the weight of everything I'd built over the years had latched onto me, daring me to find a way to keep it all from crumbling. The numbers weren't just bad, they were catastrophic. Half of the business, my business, 11 years of dawn to midnight grinds, of sleeping in my office chair, of missing birthdays and anniversaries. The sacrifices that built the foundation to give us both everything. All of it eligible for division, a sterile term the lawyer used that tasted like bile when I rolled it over in my head. It wasn't division, it was dissection, with me on the operating table. As I reached my car, I yanked the door open harder than necessary, the metallic groan sounding like an accusation. I paused before getting in, gripping the edge of the frame. My reflection in the window stared back. The first glimpse I'd really had of myself since this mess started. I looked older, more tired. Lines I hadn't noticed before stretched across my forehead, deep and permanent. The man staring back seemed like a stranger, or maybe someone I'd left behind years ago. The engine hummed to life, but I didn't throw the car into reverse right away. My fingers tapped the steering wheel as pieces of her betrayal clicked together in my mind, one after another. Hotel charges, late night, work events. The cold formality over breakfast, as if she'd already checked out of the life we built. The worst part was the ease of it for her, like it was just another one of her polished sales pitches, one more negotiation she thought I'd buy into without question. The lawyer's words circled back, irritating in their clarity. There wasn't much recourse inside the legal bounds. The system was set up to bleed someone like me dry. My pulse hammered in my neck. But anger wasn't enough. Anger didn't solve problems or protect things. I had to think, had to act. But what could I do? That same evening, I sat across from Felix at our usual steakhouse, pushing the medium-rare ribeye around my plate. The weight of the past few days had killed my appetite. Felix noticed, he always did. 20 years of friendship and handling my books meant he could read me like a balance sheet. "You've barely touched your food," Felix said between bites of his salmon. "That's not like you." I set down my fork, the metal clinking against the ceramic. The restaurant's dim lighting and private booth felt oddly comforting, like a confessional. "Found out about Delilah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's been seeing someone, some guy from her sales team." Felix's fork froze midway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, dabbing his napkin to his lips. "How long?" 6 months, maybe longer. Found the messages on her phone last week. She left it unlocked while showering. "Christ, Amos, I'm sorry." Felix leaned back, studying me with those shrewd accountant's eyes. "What are you thinking of doing?" "Divorce seems inevitable. But," I trailed off, thinking about the business, the house, everything we'd built. "It's complicated." Felix nodded, taking a thoughtful sip of his wine. Then, his expression shifted. I recognized that look. It was the same one he'd got when he'd found a clever tax loophole or investment strategy. "What if we approached this differently?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Instead of making it about the affair, what if we presented her with a financial opportunity?" My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "A tax divorce. We create a narrative about separating assets to minimize tax burden, presented as a smart financial move." Felix's eyes lit up as he warmed to the idea. She knows sales, but she's never understood the complexities of business finances. We structure it so you retain control of the company and core assets, but frame it as a mutual benefit. I sat back, letting the idea sink in. Delilah had always been motivated by money, status, the finer things. She understood the broad strokes of our finances, but left the details to me. "She'd probably jump at the chance," Felix continued, "especially if we present it as your idea, a way to optimize our financial situation. she'd never suspect the real reason. The irony wasn't lost on me. Using her own materialism and financial ignorance against her, it felt both ruthless and perfectly justified. "Walk me through how we'd do this," I said, finally taking a real bite of my steak. I was meticulous with how I laid it all out. The folders were spaced evenly on the kitchen table, resting on top of the placemats Delilah insisted we had to use. It was the little details like that which helped sell the act. Felix drilled them into me. The presentation, the tone, the pacing. He called it control of the room. Not really my thing, but if I've learned anything being married to a woman like Delilah, it's that perception outranks the message every time. When she walked in, still in her cherry red blouse from work, she looked at the folders first. Her lips tightened just enough that I noticed, but didn't say anything. I gestured to the chair across from me, and she tilted her head, her earrings catching the light. The kind of look that says, "What's this about?" but doesn't bother asking directly. "Sit down for a second," I started, calm as a pond without a breeze. Or that's how I hoped I came off. She slid the chair back noisily, a sharp contrast against the stillness I'd tried to maintain. Her movements, even when hesitant, always managed to command attention. I started slowly, explaining the idea behind the tax divorce, while flipping open one of the folders. Inside were charts, graphs, numbers, things I made sure would appeal to her practicality. For all her warmth and social settings, Delilah made decisions with a head for practicality. "Purely on paper," I said, my palms resting flat against the table. I nodded toward the middle folder, opening it to showcase a rough timeline. "The savings are real. We're not sacrificing a thing. If anything, this could bring us more options for the future." Her arms stayed crossed at first, a clear sign there was resistance. She hated being boxed into situations she didn't orchestrate herself. But the way her posture shifted slightly when Hawaii exited my mouth told me I was at least halfway there. I paused, letting the idea settle, the money, the potential trip, the practicality of it all. Her response wasn't immediate. She uncrossed her arms, tapping the edge of the table with her nails, the way she does when she's weighing something. Another tilt of her head. After a few more moments of contemplation, her fingers finally stilled, and she looked up at me. The tension in her shoulders eased, and a soft sigh escaped her lips. "All right, Amos," she said, her voice steady yet resigned. "I'll go along with your proposition." The weight of the signed papers felt heavy in my briefcase as I loaded my overnight bag into the trunk. Delilah stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the morning chill. Her silk robe, the emerald one I'd given her last Christmas, caught the breeze. I adjusted my tie, going through the motions of our usual goodbye routine. 21 years of marriage had made it automatic. A quick kiss, a reminder about the garden service coming Wednesday, promises to call when I reach the hotel. 3 days isn't so long," she said, smoothing my lapel. "The McClintock deal must be important." There was no McClintock deal, just a Marriott room 20 minutes away and a laptop connected to the security system I'd installed last week. The cameras were discreet, one in the bedroom crown molding, another angled toward the driveway, a third watching the front door. I backed out of the driveway, watching Delilah's figure shrink in my rearview mirror. She stayed there until I turned the corner, just like always. By the time I checked into the hotel, my hands had stopped shaking. The first notification came at 7:43 p.m. Motion detected, front entrance. I opened the feed to see Henry's BMW pulling up. He didn't even park around the corner anymore, didn't bother hiding. The timestamps told their own story, 8 minutes from his arrival to the bedroom. They didn't turn on the lights, but infrared caught everything. I watched them violate our bed, the same bed where I'd nursed Delilah through her bout with pneumonia 3 winters ago. where we'd spent Sunday mornings doing crosswords. The feed kept running as they fell asleep in our sheets, Henry's arm draped across my wife's waist. I closed the laptop and stared at the hotel ceiling. The air conditioning hummed, masking the sound of ice clinking in my untouched whiskey. All those business dinners Delilah had insisted on attending. The late nights at the office. The sudden interest in yoga classes. The pieces had been there for months. Now I had my confirmation, frame by frame, in high definition. I maintained my routine at work, buried myself in spreadsheets and meetings. When we crossed paths at home, I kept conversations brief and practical. Bills are on the counter. The garage door needs fixing. Simple statements devoid of emotion. One evening she cornered me in the kitchen. "You've barely said 2 words to me all week." "Just stressed with the Maxwell account," I replied, eyes fixed on my laptop screen. The lie came easily now, a shield against conversations I couldn't face. My apartment hunting happened during lunch breaks. Found a decent place 15 minutes from the office, modern, minimalist, perfect for starting over. The lease agreement felt heavy in my hands as I signed it. 21 years of shared space, reduced to 800 square feet of bachelor living. Mike and Tom helped with the move. We waited until Delilah's Mercedes disappeared down the driveway for her morning sales meetings. The 3 of us worked efficiently, loading boxes marked personal items into their trucks. My clothes, books, the few family photos I wanted to keep, left the furniture we'd picked together, the artwork she'd insisted matched the walls perfectly, even left the coffee maker she'd given me for our 20th anniversary. My office contents fit in 2 cardboard boxes, diplomas, awards, the small collection of vintage fountain pens my father had left me. The master bedroom closet took longer. 2 decades of accumulated life needed sorting. Decisions made quickly about what truly mattered. We finished by early afternoon, standing in the empty apartment, surrounded by boxes of my extracted life. The reality hit harder than any courtroom drama could have. Mike clapped my shoulder, offered to stay, but I needed the solitude, needed to process this quiet ending on my own terms. My phone buzzed with Delilah's message later that evening. "Where are you? We need to discuss the Henderson property showing." I didn't respond. Let her come home to the gaps in the closet, the empty spaces where my life used to be. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any explanation could. The package deliveries were perfectly timed. I watched the tracking numbers from my temporary apartment, confirming the envelopes had reached their destinations. Each contained a USB drive loaded with carefully selected evidence, security footage, text messages, photos, just enough to tell the story without revealing my hand in it. Within hours, my phone lit up with Delilah's calls. I silenced them, watching as notification after notification piled up. Her first voicemail was casual, asking where I was and why I hadn't come home. The second showed hints of worry. By the 5th, panic had crept into her voice. "Amos, please, this isn't like you. Just call me back. I'm getting scared." I focused on unpacking boxes instead, arranging my new space with methodical precision. Each item had its place, just like the evidence I'd gathered over months. The security cameras I'd installed at the office after first suspecting something was wrong, the GPS tracker data from her car, the hotel receipts. My phone buzzed again, this time with texts from mutual friends. Word was spreading fast. Dan's wife had apparently confronted him at their daughter's soccer practice. Henry's wife had shown up at his office, tears streaming down her face as she waved printouts of the hotel records. Delilah's messages grew more frantic. "Where are you? Please come home. We need to talk." This isn't fair. Answer me. I poured myself a scotch and watched the sunset from my new balcony. 21 years of marriage, reduced to digital evidence and moving boxes. The rational part of my brain had known this day would come, since I first found those messages on her phone. The emotional part still felt numb. More calls came in, from her sister, her best friend, even our accountant. I let them all go to voicemail. My lawyer had advised minimal contact until the paperwork was filed. Besides, there was nothing left to say. The evidence would speak for itself. I pulled into our driveway just as the sun began to set, my hands steady on the wheel despite the weight of what I was about to do. The manila envelope sat on the passenger seat, where Delilah used to sit, filled with photographs, messages, and hotel receipts, a paper trail of betrayal I'd spent weeks compiling. Through the windshield, I saw our front door burst open. Delilah rushed out, mascara streaking down her face. Her sales conference facade had crumbled, replaced by raw panic. I took my time getting out of the car, gripping both the envelope and my resolve. "Where have you been? What is going on?" Her voice cracked, hands trembling as she reached for me, the same hands that had typed those messages to Thomas and Richard, scheduling their business meetings while I worked late at the office. The security of our porch light cast harsh shadows across her face. 21 years of marriage had taught me every micro-expression, every tell when she was lying. But I didn't need those skills anymore. The truth sat heavily in my hands. Our divorce isn't fake, it's real. And so is the end of us. My voice came out steadier than I expected, each word landing like a stone in still water. I held out the envelope, watching as recognition flickered in her eyes. She knew exactly what it contained before she even opened it. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp, and papers spilled out, damning evidence of afternoon trysts and weekend conferences that never existed. "I sent copies to Sarah and Jennifer this morning," I said, referring to Thomas and Richard's wives. "They deserved to know too." The color drained from her face as she processed my words. Her perfect world of carefully managed lies collapsed in on itself. The woman who could charm any client, who had built her career on reading people, stood speechless as her own deceptions caught up with her at last. I watched as horror bloomed across her features, the same features I'd woken up to for over 2 decades. But I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no rage, just the quiet certainty that I was finally choosing myself. I turned around and walked away, leaving her standing there, rooted in the debris of her shattered facade. Each step I took felt like a release, a shedding of years' worth of deceit and disillusionment. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was leaving her and the life we had built on lies behind forever. The scandal had torn through our social circles like wildfire, Delilah's affairs exposed through a chain of careless text messages. I'd built my consulting firm from nothing, weathered economic downturns, but nothing had prepared me for seeing my wife's indiscretions splashed across country club gossip and corporate boardrooms. My phone buzzed less these days. The constant drama of Delilah's social orbit had evaporated, leaving blessed silence in its wake. No more elaborate dinner parties to host. No more navigating the complex web of her friendships and rivalries. The house felt bigger, emptier, but also cleaner somehow, as if a fog had lifted. The business thrived in unexpected ways. Without Delilah's extravagant spending and demands for partial ownership, I could reinvest profits and expand into new markets. My team seemed relieved too. They worked with renewed focus, free from the tension that had built up during those final months when Delilah would show up unannounced at the office, creating scenes. My evening routine simplified. I took time to cook proper meals, started hitting the gym again. The meditation practice I'd abandoned years ago found its way back into my mornings. Each day brought small victories, decisions made solely on their merits, not filtered through the lens of keeping peace at home. The aftermath hadn't been kind to the other families. 2 divorces, 1 messy separation still ongoing. Their children caught in the crossfire, just as I'd once feared might happen if Delilah and I had started a family. Looking back, her resistance to having kids had been a blessing in disguise. Each passing month reinforced what I'd learned the hard way, that loyalty can't be bought with gifts or status, and that peace of mind comes from staying true to your principles. My life had contracted in some ways, expanded in others, but most importantly, it was authentically mine again. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe, and comment on the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have any similar stories to share, leave them in the comments and we'll make sure to bring them to life. Thanks for watching.